Thank you, Mayor Gray. While he was talking, I was sitting, looking at the poster and hearing the description about all the modes of transit that DC has, and you're right about a lot of things, but you are truly in a blessed city and a blessed environment to be able to, for people to be able to have multitudes of choices about how they move about and get about their place that they live, work, worship, and enjoy. So, on to the opening session, the plenary. We are very fortunate to have two of the nation's leading thinkers and doers as part of our plenary session this morning. And the topic of this conversation and the session is around what is the next American dream? And I would hesitate to say that as you listen to them speak and as you think about questions and as we have this discussion this morning and as you have it over the next couple of days, that you will probably be reflecting on what is being said this morning and bringing that back into your sessions, back to your communities as you go home. I had the pleasure, for the first time, I met Chris Leinberger in 2004, I think it was. The Funders Network for Smart Growth and Livable Communities had its annual conference in Albuquerque, and we got to trip around Albuquerque as Chris was showing us what he was doing to make Albuquerque a livable, walkable place. And it was pretty cool to see. Chris is a land use strategist, teacher, developer, researcher, and author, and he balances business realities with social and environmental issues. He's a professor and founding director of the Graduate Real Estate Development Program at the University of Michigan, and he's got a number of his students here with him today. I think they're over here on my left. He's a visiting fellow at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., a founding partner of Arcadia Land Company, a new urbanism transit-oriented development and consulting firm, and president of Locus, Responsible Real Estate Developers and Investors. His most recent book, The Option of Urbanism, Investing in a New American Dream, published in 2008 by Island Press. He's also the author of Strategic Planning and Real Estate Companies, Strategic Planning for Real Estate Companies. He has written for numerous publications, such as the Atlantic Monthly, Urban Land Magazine. He has been profiled by CNN, National Public Radio, Infrastructurist, and the Washington Post, among other broadcast, web, and print media. Leinberger was voted one of the top 100 urban thinkers in a poll conducted by Planetizen, the international urban planning and architecture website. And if you haven't gone on to Planetizen or if you haven't registered for Planetizen, you should do it. It's a great resource that you get information twice a week. He was the William H. White Award winner by Partners for Communities in 2010. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Leinberger.
Thanks, Scott, and welcome to the District of Columbia. I had the privilege of walking here. I live in DuPont, so it's a mere mile away, and so many things are within walking distance or a metro ride or a bike ride here. It's just remarkable. I actually moved here 6 years ago from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and the reason I came here is because all my research showed that Washington and the Washington metro area is the model by which we're building the built environment in this country. There are more examples of walkable urban TOD in this country, or in this metro region, than any other place in the country. And by the way, I came out with a poll about that from Brookings about 3 or 4 years ago, and New York was ranked number 10. And I had the folks from the New York Post come and, they got me on the line and they started screaming at me. What do you mean we're number 10 and Washington's number 1 as far as walkable urban places? And I said, well, the thing is, everybody thinks of New York, that Manhattan and Brooklyn certainly are phenomenally walkable places. But that's where 8% of you live. And you live like Seinfeld. But the other 92% live in 4 states, at a density less than Los Angeles, living like Tony Soprano. And right here in the district, as I'll show you, there are 34 walkable urban places, and by the way, only 30% are in the district, 70% are in the suburbs. So if you want to understand walkable urbanism TOD, it's not just about the district. You have to go to Arlington, you have to go to Montgomery County, you have to even go out to Fairfax, and we're beginning to see it happen there. So this is a movement that is transforming our central cities, but also transforming our suburbs. So I want to welcome you to the future and lay out some of the research I've been doing at Brookings. Now, normally I end up showing movie clips and TV clips, and particularly early in the morning, that's partly what you want to see, but there's some research that's coming out of Brookings that I think I need to share with you that is point on about this conference and the role of TOD and walkable urbanism in this country right now, both from an economic point of view and from a social equity point of view. So basically, the pent-up demand for walkable urban development is really the key to sustainable economic growth in this country. And you put on the slides that are about 200 slides as opposed to the 20 that I was hoping to show. You don't want to go through the 200 slides, I'll guarantee you. So the thing is that the built environment, what we're talking about influencing here today, is a huge part of this entire economy. That if you take a look at your homes, this hotel, and all the infrastructure that supports it, that you would have to, that it comes to 35% of the asset base of the country. It is the largest asset class in the entire economy. If you took all the New York Stock Exchange companies and all the NASDAQ companies and took their capitalized value and doubled them, the built environment is larger. And that's why we in real estate are so proud of the fact that of the last 3 recessions, we caused 2 of them. The thing about the built environment right now, though, and particularly real estate, is it's not engaged. The money's on the sidelines. And if we want this economy to get back to growing faster than 1% per year, we must have this 35% of the built environment re-engaged. Now, the other thing that you need to understand, and all my transportation friends love me when I say this, is there are 15 infrastructure categories, and first among equals is transportation. Transportation drives development. For the 6,000 years we've been building cities, transportation drives development. And if I can modify a famous Winston Churchill quote that many of you know, we first build our transportation system, and then it molds our metro regions. So over the last 50, 60 years in the vast majority of this country, we've been building one transportation system. We all know that. And we've just been building highways. And if you only build highways, what that drives is drivable suburban development. We all know what that is: low density, modular, spread out. The only other way to build the built environment is what's known as walkable urban, where you have multiple transportation options to get you to a place. It could be a car, obviously rail transit, buses, bikes, walk there, segways, however you get there, but once you're there, it's walkable. And walkable urbanism is something that we've, as a society, have been doing for 6,000 years up until the 1940s and 1950s. So here we were building walkable urbanism back in the 19th century, early 20th century, and then we in this country put in place a huge domestic policy that basically drove us to build the alternative, drivable suburban. Now, there's no conspiracy here. I'm not a conspiracist, that this is what we wanted, but we kind of overdid it, as the Great Recession has demonstrated, because we really, by overbuilding drivable suburban, that's what's driven us into the Great Recession. So, and you all know how it's laid out on the ground, that of course we started with the freeways, and this is outside of Philadelphia where I grew up. This is the King of Prussia Mall, or the Schuylkill Expressway out in King of Prussia. Then we, of course, naturally put a mall on top of it. And when my mother took me out there back in the 60s, driving out on the freeways, I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I thought this was fabulous. And so this was market driven. And of course, we've gotten much better at building freeways since then. And it has led to, obviously, a bit more sprawl than we know what to do with. There's so many unintended consequences of the last 60 years of the built environment by building drivable suburban. But the one that concerns me, quite honestly, the most is its impact on the environment. That the built environment, again, our buildings and our transportation system by which we get between our buildings, is responsible for over 70% of energy consumption, and therefore over 70% of greenhouse gas. So at some point, we're going to get serious about climate change. And moving towards walkable urban development is the #1 way we're going to deal with it. One of the things we've now learned is that moving a household from a drivable suburban location into a green walkable urban location reduces energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions by 70 to 80%. Given that it's the #1 contributor to climate change, a 70 to 80% reduction just by moving is, in fact, the #1 way we're going to deal with it. So what we've seen in the marketplace, and I spent 20 years, I used to own a company called Robert Charles Lesser & Company, which is the largest real estate consulting firm in the country, doing market studies and financial feasibility for the major developers in this country. I sold it about 10, 12 years ago. And what we began to see in the mid-90s is that that pendulum began to come back, that the market went and changed on us, and they began to demand more walkable urbanism. That's where downtown DC began to come back. That's where downtowns throughout the country began to come back. And that's where we began to see places like Arlington begin to convert strip retail into high-density, walkable urban places. Now, there's many reasons for it, but the one reason that stands out, we know who to blame. It's the damn kids. It's their fault. It's the millennials that are demanding this. And now, I generally show a clip here, but I don't have time. You can really see it best by the TV series that we baby boomers, for instance, grew up with. We grew up with I Love Lucy and Dick Van Dyke and the Brady Bunch in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, all set in the suburbs. Hollywood does more consumer research than any industry in the economy, and they were giving us what we were aspiring to have. Well, now fast forward and look at what our kids have been growing up on, with Cheers and Seinfeld and Friends and Sex and the City, portraying a different way of living, a different aspiration. And the millennials are the ones that are driving this. Now, I hate to say it, but even though the millennials really want to kick us off this stage as quickly as possible, and I hate to tell you, we're not leaving. We baby boomers are never leaving. So the baby boomers are a part of this, and as we become empty nesters and as we start to hit 65 starting next year in huge numbers, we know that people are going to be downsizing, and many of those folks are moving to walkable urban places. Now, all that adds up to a huge demographic shift. That when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, 50% of all households had children living in them, 50% were singles and couples. Today, only 25% of all households have children living in them. 75% are singles and couples. Singles and couples are the target market for walkable urban development. And as I know, in DuPont and in Georgetown, when I walk through, there's a baby boom taking place. And all these young couples have those double prams, these Cadillac strollers that you have to get off the sidewalk for. So certainly, young families are more than welcome in the city. In the future, the marginal growth that we're going to experience in this country over the next 20 years, the net increase in households, only 14% will have children in the household. 86% will be singles and couples. By the end of by 2030, there'll be more single households than households with children. The other thing is just sheer boredom, that for years and years, we in real estate only offered, you can live in a single family home or you can live in a single family home, your choice. The creative class is demanding walkable urban places to have the interaction, and especially after they spend 8-10 hours a day staring at a computer screen. But it really comes down to the expense of owning and maintaining cars. Harriet Dragonian's brought this up many, many times, that the average family in this country spends 19% of their household income on transportation, almost all of it for cars. And that money, almost all that money, goes to Detroit, goes to Tokyo, goes to Stuttgart. And a lot of it, of course, goes to Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and Iraq, places that aren't real fond of us these days. When you take a look at the households that are in a drivable suburban situation, they're spending 25% of their household income on transportation. They have to maintain a fleet of cars to participate in society. But now take a look at the walkable urban households. That number drops to 9% spent on transportation. That's what we just heard about the high percentage that don't have a car in the district and the high percentage that are car light. And that 16% delta between those two numbers represents hundreds of billions of dollars of spending that could be shifted into housing, education, and maybe that most un-American of all activities, savings. A colleague of mine at the University of Michigan looked at some consumer research about this, looking at Atlanta and Boston, and came to conclude that the market, that about 30–40% of the marketplace wants walkable urban, 30–40% wants drivable suburban, and 30% could go either direction. So this is your classic American 50-50 split. However, on the supply side, even here in the district and in the Washington region, if we have more than 20% of our households living in a walkable urban condition, I'd be surprised. So 50% demand, 20% supply, what happens is you get pent-up demand and prices go up. So all these are studies. That's nice. Let me close by going through some research that is going to be published by Brookings in about 3 months. So I'm giving you a little sneak peek of what we've done. We've come to conclude that we've never measured urbanism very well. We don't know where DuPont Circle is, really. Where does it end? Where does it start? And how much office space is in there, how much retail space, how much housing, and we've never counted that. We don't know the density of DuPont. And then we've come up with ways of measuring the economic performance of the place and the social equity of the place. And so studies are nice, but show me the facts. And we've seen some research in the past, over the last 3 or 4 years, that have looked at walk score and the power of high walk score places as far as economic performance. But what we want to do is get much deeper into it. Now just to give you some background, there's 4 kinds of ways that we build the built environment as far as the form and the economic role it takes. There are regionally significant places, like a downtown. There are local serving places, like most of your bedroom communities that probably most of you live in. Then there's 2 forms that it takes. One, as I mentioned earlier, walkable urban, and one is drivable suburban. So that means there are 4 cells to that matrix. And in that upper left-hand corner are the regionally significant walkable urban places. And that's the focus of the study. But to do that, to focus on that quadrant, we had to oversample and look at the entire universe so we could narrow it down to just the walkable urban regionally significant. And we looked at 103 different possible places in the region here in the Washington metropolitan area. And it's hard to see, but this is the district itself. And you can see that a lot of them are in the district, but a lot of them are scattered throughout the metropolitan region. And so we're trying to focus in on just that upper left-hand quadrant of the regionally significant, those places that play a role in the regional economy and that are walkable urban. My guesstimate is that it represents only 1 to 2% of the land area of the entire region. So here are the ones that we've now studied and measured, and they fall into 6 categories as far as different kinds of places: downtown, downtown adjacent, historic commercial areas like here at Woodley Park, suburban town centers like Bethesda, redevelopment of strip retail like throughout Arlington, and there's a couple what are known as greenfield developments like Reston Town Center and National Harbor. So 6 kinds of regionally significant walkable urban places. We've now begun to measure that a local serving walkable urban place is under 1.4 million square feet of office and under 340,000 square feet of retail. But again, the focus is on walkable urban regionally significant places. They fall into 2 broad categories. One are the super regional places, and they have over 6 million square feet of office and over 2.3 million square feet of retail. That's a chunk of retail. And then there's just more regular regionally significant places that are between 1.4 and 6 million square feet of office and between 340,000 and 2.3 million square feet of retail. So looking at the findings about how these things perform, we found there are 34 existing regionally significant walkable urban places in the region and 13 more emerging. What that implies for you in other metropolitan areas is that there should be 6 to 8 regionally significant walkable urban places per 1 million of people. Most of your metropolitan areas have far fewer than that. That's the great economic benefit of building and the foundation that's going to be put under your economies by building these things out. They are between 100 and 550 acres. The average is 325 acres. These places are small relative to the region. That, again, I'm talking about just 1 or 2% of the total land mass of a metropolitan area. And by the way, the average of 11, we have 11 acres per park of a parkland in these places. And we also have a lot of data on what the product mix is between office, retail, hotel, housing, et cetera. So far in the metro DC area, a vast range from 1,200 people living in these places up to 28,000. The average is 8,300 people living in these walkable urban places. And here's an interesting fact: 84% of these places are rail transit served. They're TOD. That's not a coincidence. So we've been looking at these places as trying to measure their walkability, and we have a diagnostic tool. Now, WalkScore is a great snapshot of how walkable a place is, and I'm on the board of WalkScore, so I certainly love what they've done. It's cheap, it's quick, it's easy. But we needed something in more depth, so we have a thing that my co-investigator, Marielle Alfonso, helped develop, the Irvine, Minnesota inventory, 163 items per street throughout a walkable urban place. And we've come to realize that there's 5 different levels of walkability. So my final comments are going to be focusing on those 5 different levels. As you go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, you get more and more walkable, and they are distinct categories of walkability. Think of it like LEED. And then those 163 items break into 10 diagnostic ways. We can now figure out, we think, what needs to be improved next. Do you need to increase your density? Do you need to improve your connectivity? Does the physical activity need to be enhanced? Personal safety need to be improved? We can figure out what it takes to go from level 1 to 2, from 2 to 3. So here are the economic results. And these are the economic results of moving 1 walkability level. Again, there's 5 walkability levels, so on average, moving from 1 to 2 or from 4 to 5, we are finding office rents go up by $9 a square foot per year. That's a huge, huge number. So if you went from 1 to 5, you're talking about a $45 increase in office rents. Retail rents go up $7 a foot per year, equally large jumps for each one of these 5 steps. The premium that the office and retail values get in the marketplace, how much that building is worth. Interestingly, it's had a significant premium, as you would expect. High walkable places cost more, as those rent numbers indicate. But the other thing is that they're costing even more. That the premium that a square foot in downtown DC is worth versus the cost of office space in Tyson's Corner out in the suburbs. There was a huge premium in the early part of this last decade. During the recession, that premium nearly doubled. The market is getting that walkable urban places are hugely valuable. And walkable urban office space is growing 80% faster than the region as a whole. It is gaining market share. Downtown DC has been losing office market share for 60 years until 2005, and possibly one of the first downtowns in the country that's now gaining market share. And by the way, that explains why the Tyson's property owners, Tyson's is 44 million square feet of unmitigated hell, is why the Tyson's property owners are helping pay for the extension of Metro with 4 stations in Tyson's. That's why they've been motivated to do that. When you look at apartment rents for each step going up those 5 steps, rents go up $300 per month. And for for sale housing, each step up increases the value of the property $82 per square foot, each step. Huge jumps. So, I know what you're thinking, because what about the social equity of this? Well, as you would expect, we're finding that in each of these walkable urban places, that transportation costs for households go down dramatically. However, housing costs, what they're spending on their house, is going up. And each walkable level increases household income. It doesn't cause the increase. It's a very important point to note. But each of these walkable urban places, as you go from 3 to 4 and 4 to 5, the average household income goes up by $10,000. Keep in mind that the average household income in this country is $50,000, and each step up, it goes up $10,000. Now, the other thing is that wealthy people are living in walkable urban places. The research shows that this is not a causal relationship. This is really important from a social science point of view. That the walkable urban places don't cause you to become wealthier, moving and living in a walkable urban place. What it is that we've got a tremendous shortage of these things, and we've artificially driven up the costs. What we need is more walkable urban places to then mitigate the huge price premiums that we're getting right now. But one of the key things is accessibility to these places. These places have tremendous accessibility. So the next steps in this research is Brookings is going to be announcing this towards the end of the year. And phase 2 of it is going to go out to 3 or 4 different metros and create a sustainable business model, a la WalkScore or USGBC. But it's very much obvious that walkable urban places are the key to U.S. economic growth, sustainability, and increased social equity. And let me just close by saying, one of the things that I've always felt, but this research has really driven home, is that each of these walkable urban places demands a conscious, affordable housing strategy. And the big question, of course, is how do you pay for it? And let me just leave you with one film image. I like the film Back to the Future. It's my favorite film, 1985. And there's Back to the Future 1, which I always use. But Back to the Future 2 is also important because you may not remember, because you probably haven't watched it 20 times like I have, that the bad guy is Biff. And Biff took from 2015, he took back to the past in 1985, the sports scores of all the major sporting events for the next 30 years and bet on it, couldn't lose. We know where the economic growth is going to take place. It's going to be around transit stops. We have that book. If we can't figure out a way to make a buck and pay for the affordable housing knowing that, Shame on us. Thank you very much.